It's the Harris Football Podcast with your host, Christopher Harris.
Welcome! Hey, everybody. Welcome in. My name is Chris. This is a podcast that I make by yelling, apparently. Thank you so much for listening. I am so happy to report that I have gotten my second shot of the Pfizer vaccine. I plan on still wearing a mask until smart people say it's no longer necessary. You know, I said this on Twitter, but I'll say it again here. I will go to war for my Pfizer compatriots. We're all now on a team together. We are clearly the best people, and everyone else is simply vaccine slumming. But yeah, no matter which one you get, go get it. Let's get our lives back. Thank you very much for that. I mean, there is probably nowhere else to start this week's show other than Jordan Howard re-signing with the Eagles. Just kidding. I very much do not care about that. And frankly, if Jordan Howard is all that stands between Miles Sanders and a great big workload, I mean, Boston Scott is still there. He's all right. He has his uses. The top rusher in Philly is probably going to be Jalen Hurts, maybe. But still, Sanders was not great in the second half of the season. But yeah, if the Eagles stay away from a rookie rusher, I like Miles Sanders' talent the best of anybody on that running back roster. So, 15 to 20 top running backs, maybe. Something like that, possible for Miles Sanders. All right, why did I get off on an Eagles tangent? All for the sake of a joke. Truthfully, the main NFL news that happened since I last recorded a show last week is the Jets giving up the ghost, pun intended, officially on Sam Darnold, trading him away to the Carolina Panthers for what mostly amounts to a second-round pick next year. It firms up one of the league's worst-kept secrets, which is that the Jets were always going to take a quarterback at the number 2 pick. Good thing Darnold led them to those 2 straight wins in December last year, so they can't have Trevor Lawrence. I don't know. We are where we are. The Jets will start a rookie under center in 2021. Speculation is that there's a big consensus. It's going to be Zach Wilson of BYU. And meanwhile, the Panthers have options, I guess, with Teddy Bridgewater. But Bridgewater was what we said he'd be last year, right? His usual ultra-conservative self. Completion percentage always looks good, but too often couldn't make himself pull the trigger downfield. And to be fair, didn't have Christian McCaffrey. And the offensive line wasn't good, but Bridgewater is due a massive cap hit for this season. They can cut him after June 1st and recoup $7 million against the cap, but still pay like $15 million in dead money, so he might still be there. Yeah, if only someone could have told you that signing Teddy Bridgewater wouldn't work out. I think, yeah, we did. But so, anyway, maybe he's there, right? Maybe this is a competition. Maybe Darnold gets the job for sure, and there's no competition. They did Carolina exercise the option year on Darnold, so they're going to have him in 2022 as well. They're paying him a good amount of money, so I think it's probably Darnold. And maybe the Panthers take a rookie quarterback if one falls to them at 8th overall in the draft here in about a month. But I tend to doubt that that's going to happen. We now know that 1, 2, and 3 are going to be quarterbacks because the Jets did what they did, because the Niners traded up into 3. The Falcons could take the 4th best guy at number 4. They could sell that pick to the highest bidder. The Lions at 7 have Jared Goff, who is also a stopgap in a rebuild. So I tend to think that a quarterback who would be worth taking in the top 10 won't be there for the Panthers at 8 unless they're the ones who decide to move up. Would the Falcons deal that pick within the division? I suppose we shall see. So, okay, for the Jets, the equation becomes pretty simple. Rookie quarterback, probably Zach Wilson, almost certainly going to struggle at first. Had one big year at BYU. My guest today knows his stuff. He believes that Wilson is going to be a bust if he's the number 2 overall pick because of accuracy and because of vision issues. He thinks the comparisons to Patrick Mahomes are completely a joke and that Wilson is way more like Drew Lock or maybe at best Baker Mayfield. And either way, it's just not going to be smooth as the Jets build from the bottom. They don't yet have a running back that we like. unless you've decided this guy is great.
Stands upright on a football run. Devin Coleman is a turkey mayo.
Devin Coleman is a turkey mayo, and he's in the Jets backfield now with a bunch of other middling talents. Corey Davis signed there. Is Corey Davis maybe the Devin Coleman of wide receivers? I whiffed on Davis hard when he got drafted. I bought, right? I am not assuming that year 5 in his career with a less experienced quarterback is going to be any different. Jamison Crowder, Denzel Mims, they're going to be rookies added in subsequent rounds. They have Seattle's first rounder, which is number 23 overall, that came in the Jamal Adams trade. That could easily be a receiver or maybe even a running back. They have a second, they have 2/3, whatever. The point is, this might not be the final offensive cast, but I simply don't really like any of these players. And a wet behind the ears rookie QB isn't where I'm rushing to make exceptions for the talent around him. The Panthers, assuming Darnold is the guy, well, you're going to get all kinds of straight lines drawn to Robbie Anderson because he was on the Jets with Darnold for a couple years, and his seasons with Darnold were pretty blah. There's really no argument that Robbie Anderson's best season came with Sam Darnold. It came with Teddy Bridgewater last year, but again, McCaffrey was hurt. Robbie Anderson is what he is. He's all kinds of straight line fast, right? He's a clear deep threat burner who clears things out, who either helps your fantasy team by making a couple downfield catches or he snoozes. And Robbie Anderson is just not someone I will consider even slightly as a lovely, wonderful pick. No one's going to call him elite, but I do think people are going to just be like, oh, Darnold knows him. Let's hike Robbie Anderson's rank. I don't feel like I'm going to do that. I don't know what the rank is yet, but I don't think DJ Moore's better. He's just a better player. He should be valued in fantasy as a better player. I don't care that Robbie Anderson played with Sam Darnold. I think DJ Moore can catch 100 balls even with Christian McCaffrey healthy. And if Darnold makes Carolina better, I think more benefits, period, pretty much regardless of his role. Darnold being more aggressive than Bridgewater, which I believe he is, it helps more, I think, more than it helps Anderson, because Anderson's just a limited player who needs his bomb catches to go for touchdowns. He's going to average 15 yards a catch. He always does. And then it's the question of, does he have a couple of long scores? He'll have a couple, right? Just hard to count on. Moore has been hamstrung by conservative quarterback play all 3 of his seasons. He's had some yards. He's had a couple 1,000-yard seasons, but not many touchdowns. He just has a more diverse skill set. McCaffrey's McCaffrey. He's a little dude, and he shouldn't touch it 300 times. Not good for him, but he's one of the most electric players in the world, and I wouldn't say that Darnold being there changes that at all. I don't think Sam Darnold's particularly good.
Seeing ghosts.
There it is. He's that guy. He's the seeing ghost guy, right? And he'll be more aggressive than Bridgewater. Almost anyone would be more aggressive than Bridgewater, and it might benefit these offensive skill weapons a little bit. You're not going to say that it benefits McCaffrey more than we're already considering McCaffrey. I think it benefits more. I do. I think it does a little bit. Moore's a really good player. I like a more aggressive quarterback for him. I think McCaffrey's really not tied to the quarterback at all. It's just like, give him 250 touches, please. I don't think the quarterback has all that much to do with that. And you can let the other folks get excited about Robbie Anderson, and this is all still a work in progress. We'll see if there are more trades. We'll see if more skill guys wind up going to these places. We have time to amend our opinions. But maybe for me, the winner of that trade, actually more like DJ Moore.
Today's kickoff.
Okay, on today's show, I've already teased his appearance without naming him. This week is the beginning of our evaluating what we think these incoming skill position rookies are. And first up in our great lineup of college scouting experts is one of the best. It'll be Matt Waldman from Football Guys and the Rookie Scouting Portfolio. It's a treat to get him. And really, the rest of this episode, most of this episode is going to be about Matt's assessment of the rookie running backs who will be coming into the league in 2021. As always, important to have feelings about the abilities of these guys before they have landing spots. And you know why? Because you know what you're going to hear most places once they have landing spots. Oh, he's got a clear path to 200 and whatever touches, right? That's going to be the basis on which people make their decisions, and situations change too much from year to year for us to be drafting based solely on that. So we will get grounded in talent assessment for the rookie RBs who matter with Matt Waldman. It's going to be fun, and I thank you very much for listening today. Today's show is sponsored by Gabi Insurance. That's Gabi. The name literally stands for Get a Better Insurance. I have used Gabi, so I can tell you firsthand, it's like doing a checkup on your existing insurance policies. Getting better insurance with Gabi means a better price for insurance coverage you already have. Gabi lets you do an apples-to-apples comparison of your current coverage with 40 top insurance providers like Progressive, Nationwide, and Travelers. In just a few minutes, you can find out whether Gabi can get you the same coverage you already have for less, and it is free to use. I did it. I had my homeowner's policy forever. I got a PDF of that policy. I uploaded it to Gabi, and they found me the same policy at Progressive for less money. On average, Gabi customers save $961 per year. And if they can't find you savings, they'll let you know so you can relax. You got the best rate out there already. And they will never sell your info, so no annoying spam or robocalls. Put your policy to the test like I did. Get a better insurance with Gabi. It's totally free to check. There's no obligation. Go to Gabi.com/Harris. That's Gabi.com/Harris. Gabi.com/Harris.
Today's guest.
And today's guest, it is Matt Waldman. I just talked about him. He's on the podcast. He is on Twitter at Matt Waldman. And first of all, hello, my friend.
Oh, it's always great to say hello and catch up, and this is going to be a lot of fun today.
Right. We already talked for half an hour before we started recording. Yeah, Matt and I get along. Let's just say we get along. We have some similar life experiences. Yeah. Okay, so this is a great time of year to have you on. This is really the start of my starting to think about these incoming rookies, and I have, of course, like any fan, I've already talked about Sam Darnold, and I'm paying attention to who's got what picks, and I know all the names, but I have to admit, this year, maybe more than any other, I'm not a huge college football watcher. Like, I don't watch 7 games a weekend for college football just for fun, right? But this year, with everything that was going on, and with not feeling like the kids had a lot of choices in their lives, had to go out and play during something that was scary, I watched nothing. I watched none. So I'm really relying on you and relying on all the guests over the next month to get me ready to think about these guys. And I'm starting to watch film based on what you're telling me to watch. And this is all in service of the rookie scouting portfolio, the RSP. And man, all the listeners right now, I mean, you don't have to be a dynasty player to read this thing. It's, if you like my almanac, actually, Matt, I'm going to embarrass you and maybe embarrass me a little bit, because we both got an email from a listener to this show named Pete Jacobson. You saw that email?
Yeah, I sure did.
It's really nice. So yeah. I'm going to read it because I think this is coming from a listener, from a fellow yacht possum enthusiast. So I've shortened it a little bit just because I talk enough, God knows. So Pete says, Chris and Matt, I've been a football fan since I was a kid, but never really understood football, much like watching where the golf ball ends up versus the setup and mechanics involved in how it got there. I never learned the football equivalent until learning some of what makes you two experts in your field. Holy crap, I learned so much in the first 40 pages of the rookie scouting portfolio, which actually has nothing to do with any specific player. Much like the Almanac, the RSP is qualitative as much as quantitative, getting me outside of the thousands of groupthink player rankings out there, not to mention that it's smart, enjoyable, and funny. I do not expect to be a film guru, but at least I can say I have a better understanding and watch the game versus the box score, thanks to my degree from RSP and Possum University. Sincere regards, Pete Jacobson. And that's just by way of saying I get the RSP every year. Boy, you don't have to be a dynasty player. You don't just get to know these players. It's so refreshing, Matt, to read your very extensive profiles and understand that you know roughly where the market is in all these guys, but you don't feel compelled to agree.
Yeah, I mean, and that's part of that is just sticking to a process. So when I've had this process that I've refined for 16 years, and at some point you kind of have to trust that process to keep doing it. And you're going to make mistakes, but you just build on those mistakes and figure out ways to make your process better. And that's what I've been doing all these years. So, last year, I'll give you an example. I mean, last year, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Louis Riddick, who, the esteemed Louis Riddick, former player, ESPN guy who, he knows the Kansas City Chiefs, pretty well, knows Brett Veach pretty well. And I had people going, well, why wouldn't you listen to, Louis Riddick when he said that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a top 5 running back in fantasy this year, book it. And I'm like, because I don't know what his process is. His process might have been just talking to Brett Veach, and I don't know what Brett Veach's process is. It doesn't mean that I'm better than what they do. It's just that I know what it is that I stick to learn and get better. And if I go with them and they're wrong, then I don't know why they were wrong. So I need to stick with what I'm doing. And it turned out I was, that my assessment of him as more of a top 15 back to begin the 2020 season was correct. And for the reasons they were correct too. But that doesn't mean it's always going to happen that way. But it's the point of that my rankings are going to be different because while I don't watch, 7 games every weekend in terms of like keeping up with the narratives. Heck, I just found out Devonta Smith won the Heisman 2 weeks ago. But I watch probably 5 to 7 games a day, watching college film without a narrative, without what the media thinks, so that I can arrive at my conclusions as an unbiased observer as possible.
Right. So I want everybody who's interested in this 1,000-page document, this massive document that is really incredibly useful. I look back at previous years to just get a sense of, that guy's made some noise. Do we think? I want to check. I know what he looks like in the NFL. I want to check what Matt thinks of his college film as well. Like, really, honestly, you should get it. Just go to mattwaldmanrsp.com and you'll find out all the details that you need. So you're here to talk running backs. And I think this is maybe being regarded as somewhat of a weak class if you talk about what they're capable of doing the moment they step into the league. But having looked at all of your profiles for these running backs and read them all the way through, it's probably more about the future. There are a few guys that legitimately could be horses, legitimately could be fantasy gold, NFL team gold, 80% snap type running backs. Maybe none of them will do that right away.
For sure. And I think that part of that is that we've had some strong classes of running backs in the recent years, and still some guys who are, top backs who are still going pretty strong. And you look at just the fact that teams are also relying on more of a committee approach. So a lot of these guys may wind up in committee situations. But you're right. It's that, there's 4 to 6 backs who I think have an opportunity to play early, maybe not start right away. Maybe you're looking at 2 to 3 guys who might get a shot to start right away. And that just depends on the fit.
Sure. Depends on the landing spot. We don't know that yet. But of course, the reason we go through this process is because you just said it yourself. All due respect to Mr. Riddick. I didn't really know him very well at ESPN. He came and talked to some, I don't know. I don't want to get into it. The Cajun lawyer, we call him Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I always was super, super skeptical of that. Of the regard with which he was held, because everybody got blinded by Chiefs.
Right.
And if you had a solid base of understanding what Edwards-Helaire did in college and was capable of doing in the pros, you probably didn't think he was like a Saquon Barkley type player, right? You just sort of
exactly.
And a lot of my assessment of Edwards-Helaire last year was based on your RSP, frankly. So thank you for that, because that turned out to be a right call for me as well. So let's talk about I imagine there's some level of consensus that there are 3 guys in the running back class who are going to go in some order, 1, 2, 3 among running backs. None of them might go in the first round. I don't think we know that yet.
Yeah.
And then there's another name I want to talk about that maybe interests me even more. But Najee Harris, I'll start, the Alabama kid. Big, people have seen him hurdling that dude. Right. We did. If people are not checking out the Harris Football YouTube channel, we're doing breakdowns of all these guys. We have a Najee Harris breakdown up there. We show you the hurdling of the Notre Dame dude. He's a big guy, but he's a really good athlete for his size. And he's obviously incredibly productive in his boom year here. Like, tell me the negatives for Najee Harris, because I think the positives are pretty obvious.
His pass protection is awful right now. And when I say awful, it's he tips off defenders because he drops his head towards the collision point, and basically defenders can just swim over the top of him or pull him and just throw him to the side or to the ground because he doesn't have balance and he's tipping off what he's doing. He can get better, obviously. When he does make contact, he's pretty good. But the problem is that he presents an obstacle that's easy to get away from right away because of that. The other thing is that short yardage, as big and strong and quick as he is and as fleet-footed as he is, he tends to have a habit where if the first hole doesn't come open, instead of plowing into it and pushing, he wants to look for a chance to bounce or cut back, and he'll literally retreat from the crease and try to turn his back and turn away and get into open space. So there's some issues with that, with his game, that are probably the kind of the worst case scenario things. His pad level can get a little bit too high, and you'd like to see him, drop those pads a little bit more so that he can maximize his power. But overall, I mean, I'd say those are issues that aren't going to prevent him from being a starter, but they might prevent him from having, that 80%,
right,
touch share that you're looking for in the first year of his career.
Yeah, I mean, he comes in and whiffs a few times in pass protection. Good. You're not playing on third down, kid. Like, you have a lot to learn, no question about it. And so I've consumed the RSP profile and something. So the comparisons that you like, 6'2", 230, you're looking for a kid to run with real power. And I think you just said you're not convinced that he always runs with really good power, although there definitely are examples where he does. And you've heard people compare him to Matt Forte, another tall guy who is heavy. And I think you've said, stop making that comparison. For Najee Harris enthusiasts, it's just not the same. He for 6'2", 230, he can really scoot. He has a really good long speed. Like, if he gets going and gets 20 yards down the field, he can literally run away from almost anyone on the field. But Matt Forte was a really great cutter, and then just had that 0 to 10 yards. He had a special acceleration that I think you're saying Najee Harris does not have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Matt Forte was a glider. He was the type of guy that made it look effortless, and Najee Harris looks like he's working kind of hard to get close to Matt Forte's gait in terms of being able to run that smoothly. But Chris Carson is a good comparison. Maybe a faster Chris Carson, maybe a guy with more high-end receiving skills than what Chris Carson's shown. And Chris Carson isn't a bad receiver. But Harris, I would say, is where Chris Carson is hoping to continue to develop his game but won't likely get there. I think Harris has a little bit of a higher notch that he could attain than where Carson is. And so that's promising, because you look at Chris Carson, what he did with Seattle, and not with an unbelievable line either. So you get Najee Harris in a good system, and you won't care whether the comparison is Chris Carson or Matt Forte. You're just going to be looking at the box score stats that you're going to be collecting from him.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think we're relatively enthusiastic about Najee Harris. I think you're less enthusiastic than the NFL market is telegraphing that it is, or at least a lot of mock drafters are telegraphing. Because of the three running backs that seem to be the consensus top three in most talent evaluators, Travis Etienne is the one you have lowest. He's the Clemson kid. Again, go to youtube.com/Harris Football. You can see our scouting report. There's tons of stuff to like about Travis Etienne, obviously, right? He's an explosive player. But again, maybe I'm going to just start negative because, wow, what a shock. I'm starting negative. But what don't you like about Etienne as a prospect? I don't think you're saying he's a bust, but you have him ranked 5th among running backs in this class.
Yeah, and I think that you have to understand that when someone evaluates in the media like I do, you're not evaluating for a specific team. So, for instance, if I was an outside zone team or maybe running a lot of gap, like toss plays, power, trap plays, things like counter plays, Travis Etienne would probably be higher on my board because I know specifically what I'm looking for, and that's a back who can hit a hole fast with speed and be rugged enough to work through wraps or reaches or bounce off glancing shots and then be able to take that ball the distance. In that sense, Etienne's great. But the thing is that when people were confused that he didn't come out last year, like he doesn't really need another year, and I was thinking, oh yes he does, because this is a guy who tended to lean too much on his athletic traits and bounce plays outside that he shouldn't have, didn't press creases long enough in the zone game so that he could really set up his options well, and just thought that he could outrun people. And he was mistaken often enough that you might say, well, for the college game, he gained, so many yards and had so many touchdowns, and look at these highlight plays, and that's great. But you also have to project towards the NFL. When you project towards the NFL, the types of plays that he failed on because he didn't press and cut, and are issues that really would stall drives and cause him to lose touches in the way that Miles Sanders lost touches his first year because he didn't press things and understand how to run zone as well as he should. And Etienne made some strides last year, but he's probably the back in the top 5 who's most capable of backsliding because of his tendency to want to try and make that big play with his speed and press too hard the way, say, Reggie Bush way back in the day did early on in his career, tried to, do too much. Etienne is a decent pass protector, but he also has some issues with ball security. His ball security has seemingly gotten worse over the course of his career, as opposed to getting better. So that's kind of a trend you'd like to see stopped. And we've seen guys like Sanders and Sony Michel, whether you look at their success or not, who were really poor in terms of ball security rate, improve that dramatically within their first year or even even maintain that in their second seasons. But Etienne's going to have to prove that as well. But he's a guy that you look at and he may be a little bit more limited in the scheme that you want to place him with. But if he goes to a team with the right scheme, and to me, the teams that offer that type of scheme with, pulling action or at least a lot of gap plays, you could see where he'd fit there. Like, I wouldn't mind seeing him in a place like Arizona. I wouldn't mind seeing him. Certainly the Colts are a great example of a team that does this, but they don't need another back, I don't think.
Right.
But outside zone, they can transition to an outside zone because that's usually what gap players eventually pick up the best when they transition from gap to zone. So a wide zone team like the 49ers, the Jets, those are two teams that could probably benefit in that way.
A quick break to say that this week's podcast is made possible by First Leaf, a great longtime sponsor. It's a wine club. I belong to it because it's just better. I like wine. I certainly have drunk a fair share of wine during the quarantine, but I wouldn't say I'm necessarily a wine snob. Buying wine in a store has always tended to be a little hit or miss for me. First Leaf is a better way to get wine. That's what I've found. It is based on collaborative filtering. I love that. So based on a quiz that you take at the beginning and then also based on how you rate the wine that they send you, First Leaf's website gets smarter about what wines to send you next. No other wine club does this, and I really have discovered some new favorites because of First Leaf exactly this way. And also, it helps that First Leaf saves you up to 60% off of retail. Huge fan of First Leaf. If you like wine, you will love it. You can save time, money, and stress with First Leaf, the wine club designed with you in mind. Join today and you'll get 6 bottles of wine for $29.95 and free shipping. Go to tryfirstleaf.com/Harris. That's 6 bottles of wine for $29.95 and free shipping. Smartest wine club out there. Tryfirstleaf.com/Harris. Okay, we're back with Matt, and we are going down the ranks of the running backs in this upcoming rookie class. We talked about Travis Etienne, and he has been on the NFL radar for, it just seems like ever. It's 3 years, but it seems like, God, everybody looked at him as a freshman and was like, can you imagine what this dude's going to do in the NFL? And all we've been doing is imagining since then. And it is a little alarming to me to hear, the defenses in the league are getting smaller. That's just the bottom line. They're getting faster, they're getting smaller. If you think you can make your living by trying to break everything big, by hesitating, you just get tackled.
Right.
So that's by way of comparing him to I think you can tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems like if there's a group of 3 at the top, Javonte Williams would be the third. He had, not as illustrious a program at North Carolina. He has another back who's in this draft who we're going to talk about, so it wasn't like a full workload. And he also has some limitations, but I think probably compared to an Alabama kid or a Clemson kid, a North Carolina kid is not as much in the general NFL fans' consciousness. And again, go to youtube.com/Harris Football, take a look at what we think of Javonte Williams. But tell me, what does he do well? And then we'll talk about what he doesn't do as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably, with him, he's probably the safest running back that you can get in the early rounds, mainly because physically, he's a guy with a low center of gravity. He's strong. He's quick. He has enough speed to be able to flip the field if you give him decent blocks in the box. So the vision is there. He can run both gap and zone plays. He's a promising blocker. He's someone that, he's been able to take on frontline box defenders one-on-one, and at least at the worst buy time for his quarterback when he's facing someone who just overmatches him physically. But at best, he's able to hold off guys, linebackers, safety blitzes. He picks up blitzes pretty well. He shows some potential with handling twists in game that box defenders run when it comes to blitz packages and pass rushing packages. So that's good. But you also have a guy who has terrific contact balance, change of direction, quickness, and footwork are really 3, kind of the trinity of what you're looking for from a back to help them aid their decision-making process. And, and when you complement that with the ability to kind of see and read and set up blocks, this is a guy that he can break multiple tackles. He can drag people for extra yards. He's going to get you positive yards in a way where, a guy like Jordan Howard, who nobody loves, in fantasy, but he's going to get you reliable yards in that way at worst. But unlike Jordan Howard, he has enough explosion to his game to actually gain, big play rushes of 15 yards or more and often flip the field of 40-yard gains. And he can catch the ball very well. He was just paired with a back we're also going to talk about who happens to be one of the best pass-catching backs in this draft. So Javonte Williams is a guy that you might not have him right away start for your team, but he could wind up being a committee back who gets 8 to 12 touches per game, and then that grows over the course of the season so that by year 2, he's the lead back.
And the only name I believe that you invoke when it comes to comparison for Javonte Williams was a favorite of ours around here, only because people wrote him off as an unexciting player who would never really amount to anything, Mark Ingram. Mark Ingram came in with lots and lots of hype. He probably was never that kind of prospect, but just looked like it because he was at Alabama. He kind of languished in some frustrating committees for a while, and then eventually some of that quality, if we talk about Ingram, it echoes so much of what you're saying about Javonte Williams. Like, was he ever the fastest? No. Was he ever like the best cutter? No. Was he ever the best accelerator? No. Was he pretty darn good at all of those things while being a monster to tackle, just like a nasty dude? I think if you're as nasty as Mark Ingram and you have what you're describing of Javonte Williams as just enough of those other things, situation's going to matter, and maybe this doesn't happen right away, but let's take a look at him.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, I mean, I love Mark Ingram, but Mark Ingram's he's like a pro's pro. He's that guy that does everything you're looking for pretty well. But people get excited about speed and like dramatic moves like jump cuts and things like that. And I would just recommend to you, if you want to learn something profound about running back play today, just go to MattWaldmanRSP.com and type in the search box or type in on Google, Matt Waldman, what would Frank Gore do? And what I show you is a play of Anthony McFarland, a player that a lot of people got excited about because he was fast and he makes a lot of jump cuts. And there's a play with him against the Steelers where he loses like 4 or 5 yards. And I literally was watching this on one Sunday afternoon, and I thought, I wonder what Frank Gore would do. And I pulled up some tape of Frank Gore in the same week. I kid you not, the first play turned out to be the exact similar way the defense defended it. And Frank Gore gained nearly 10 yards on the play. And this was Frank Gore Jets, old Frank Gore, last
right.
year, Frank Gore.
Savvy. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it just shows you the difference in efficient footwork is the deal. You want to be quick, you want to be fast, but all those things are just baselines. It's how you use that stuff. And sometimes how you use it is how can you be most efficient with it. And a guy like Ingram has always been very efficient, and the same thing goes for a guy like Javonte Williams.
Yeah, he's a 4.58 40 guy. He's not going to blow you away with long speed. If we were complaining about Najee Harris's acceleration to get up to that top speed, I mean, he's more of a sub 4.5 guy. Najee Harris at whatever he is, 6'2", 230. He's a freak for his size. If you were going to set them up and not have any defenders around them, yeah, I'm pretty sure we would know who would go faster. But that's not always how the NFL works. And obviously landing spot's going to matter to the way we interpret these guys, but I think it's important to keep in mind our evaluations of we'll call them the big three. I'll just quickly ask you before we move on to other players, have you had the feeling, as I have, the way there seems to be this kind of rallying media drumbeat that those are the first 3 running backs off the board?
Oh yeah, I think it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that those are the backs that everyone's pretty much tied to as the top of this class, whether they are or not.
Right. Well, there you go. The segue, the transition, genius, because your number 1 running back in this class we haven't actually talked about yet, but we will do so now. In terms of depth of talent, which is one metric that you have in the RSP, your second favorite running back of the last 3 drafts is in this draft. Second favorite behind only another player who I really like, J.K. Dobbins, who you liked as your favorite of the last 3 years. I'm pausing, I'm tantalizing because honestly, listeners, get the RSP. I hate to be giving you the hard sell, but you're not going to get groupthink in this thing. So Matt has Trey Sermon as his number 1 back in terms of depth of talent, maybe not as the absolute highest ceiling, but maybe the best. See, if you disagree with what I'm about to say, because I'm trying to kind of summarize the way you wrote it, in terms of the combination of really good ceiling and also just not going to miss, not going to be a bust. I think so. Trey Sermon, I think for that reason, is why he's your number 1.
I think that's a good way to assess it. And listen, we certainly have our misses as evaluators. We all do. But running backs has kind of been my thing. And so this isn't the first time that I've had a player ranked number 1 above a consensus number 1. And it's worked out pretty well. I liked Matt. I didn't have Matt Forte as my number 1 back, but way back in the day, Matt Forte was one of my top backs in a class where people didn't even know who he was. I had Joseph Adai early on in a class of backs ranked very highly in that sense. And recently, Nick Chubb I had ranked over Saquon Barkley, and certainly Barkley got hurt, and you could argue who's better, but the fact that
I'll argue, but Barkley's better, but Chubb is awesome. Yeah,
but Chubb is awesome, and I'll say, we could do a whole other show arguing that one, but that's the point, is that the fact that I'm not going to sit there and I'm not just throwing out guys for controversy. Trey Sermon's a guy that when you watch his game, just as we talked earlier about what would Frank Gore do, this guy has efficient footwork. But not only is he efficient, but when you look at the numbers that matter, the numbers that really do give you a reflection of what you see on the field, it's his 20 shuttle and 3-cone times. Because he runs a 4.57 40, which isn't bad. It's a little faster than Javonte Williams, or in that same ballpark. But his 4.28 3-cone or 20 shuttle is a nice level of burst, and the 6.83 3-cone is also very quick. But it's also how he uses it, because one of the things that you'll often see with some backs who have slower 3-cones and slower 20 shuttles, if they're successful in the league, is that they have something that I've learned the term of, what's called curvilinear movement, and that's the ability to bend around obstacles at a high speed. Dalvin Cook has great curvilinear movement, and he was a guy that all the analytics people went nuts about the idea of him being a top prospect because he didn't have good numbers, and they just couldn't see how that was ever going to work.
I remember.
Because they were watching the film. Yeah, and I was like, you can't do that. You have to look at what happens on the field and correspond it to what, whether or not the metrics apply to what that guy's style is. And so Trey Sermon has the hard cuts. He'll make hard cuts that Dalvin Cook won't make. He's also a little bigger than Dalvin Cook. And I'd say he's a little stronger in terms of after contact balance. But in addition to that, he has what Cook has, is that curvilinear movement to work across the face of defenders at full speed and flip the field where he's in the second level against coming down the middle, towards a linebacker, and then just, bend across their face and then turn up the seam. And he does that very well, but he also has the footwork and bend and quickness to defeat safeties and cornerbacks playing the force responsibility at the edge. So he's a guy who can beat you one-on-one. He can avoid penetration. He runs either scheme extremely well. People will say, well, he transferred from Oklahoma. That must mean that he got beat out. Well, not necessarily, because in today's college football, the way college football is, and if you're a big-time alum, you can thank yourself for this, is that because you expect your players to basically be unpaid pros, and in terms of their commitment, in terms of their focus, whether that means these guys getting steered out of academics the way that they shouldn't get steered out of it, and to all the nefarious things that can happen in programs, not always, but can happen. And these players have learned to look out for themselves because they know that they may have an opportunity to actually get paid one day. So if you're Trey Sermon and they bring in a great back like Kennedy Brooks, and then there's another guy like Romandre Stevenson who's pretty darn good, who comes in, and you see that Ohio State has a need for a running back, and they're in contention for a national championship every year, wouldn't you go there if you were a top running back? I mean, so. Sure.
And then Master T got hurt, didn't play that much. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, as far we don't know, but as far as we know, the reasons for the transfer were not behavioral. As far as we know. It was not like bad kid had to get out of there. He just looked at the depth chart and said, why am I doing this? Why would I do this? Right. This is my last year. And it worked out very well. So if we're, I'm not going to agree because I don't really know. I'm listening, but upon listening to you and reading the RSP, I have the depth of talent score being really high. I think what you mean is system won't matter that much. He can pretty much do whatever you need to do. And maybe his peak won't be as peaky as the best back in this class winds up being, who we don't know who that is yet, because they'll wind up on the perfect situation and someone else will get hurt and they'll just pop and be amazing. That maybe Trey Sermon doesn't quite have that level of ceiling, but for someone who is projected to be a third or a fourth round NFL draft pick, sure, that probably means they don't have the draft capital invested in him to make it mandatory they play right away, but you're going to take him in dynasty leagues.
Yeah, I would even clarify it a little bit more and say he could have a Le'Veon Bell-like beginning to his career, where Le'Veon Bell wasn't an absolute speedster, but what he did skill-wise and the right fit, you would say he was one of the best backs to come out in his class. And it's interesting because I've been on a couple of shows with some other scouts who talk to scouts around the league. And when I mentioned Trey Sermon as my number one, even a month ago, when I knew that it was going to be that way still, and he'd been that way pretty much all year, I've had people come back to me, including people writing me and say, there's a number of scouts who agree with you, who think that in 3 to 4 years he'll be the best back in this class. But a lot of people are under-ranking him because of the injury, because he switched programs, because he doesn't have the consistency of production that some of these other guys have had. But skill-wise, there are a lot of people who have the same sentiment.
One more quick break. You want to talk about sponsors I use? Today's show is brought to you by HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. I've been making HelloFresh meals for years, but you've only recently been able to see me do it. HelloFresh is actually sponsoring the aforementioned college scouting that we're doing on YouTube, so you can see me making amazing HelloFresh meals. This week I made honey miso broccoli and sweet potato donburi, gnocchi with spinach and heirloom tomatoes topped with garlic butter breadcrumbs, and sweet potato and poblano quesadillas with Southwest crema and radish tomato salsa. And if that menu rundown made you hungry, it should. They were all really, really good. And HelloFresh makes it so easy. They send you everything you need, pre-measured ingredients. Just follow the instructions. You'll make a great dinner in 30 minutes or less. It's a terrific way to break out of a cooking rut. If you're looking to cook for a healthier lifestyle, they'll send you a vegetarian or low-calorie or carb-smart options. On average, a HelloFresh meal costs 28% less than shopping at the grocery store and 72% less than eating at a restaurant. Go to HelloFresh.com/HarrisFootball12 and use the code HarrisFootball12, and you'll get 12 free meals, including free shipping. There is video proof that I love HelloFresh, love getting that box every week. HelloFresh.com/HarrisFootball12 and use the code HarrisFootball12 for 12 free meals and free shipping. All right, we're back with Matt, and we've gone, I would say, with a fine-tooth comb over 4 running back prospects. There are a couple other guys who could be immediate contributors right away based on what you wrote, and I'm interested in hearing, and then I'll probably just toss a bunch of names and put them in a blender and see what stands out to you. Let's do the other North Carolina running back. You mentioned him earlier. We both referred to Michael Carter. He was the Lightning part of the North Carolina Thunder and Lightning. He might be the best receiving back in this draft. Maybe. You can tell me whether that's true. And if the league's getting smaller on defense, a lot of teams on offense are getting smaller too, and throwing to running backs is a very big part of a lot of offenses. He could have a lot of value right away.
Absolutely. And if you ask me, if we could have taken Michael Carter and Clyde Edwards-Helaire and say, which one would you prefer the Chiefs have? I would have picked Carter. Wow. And that's because, and it's not by much, but just by enough, because I think Carter is a sturdier runner who actually can break tackles in the box at a better rate than what Clyde Edwards-Helaire has done. Edwards is a bully in open space, and he's a slick runner. I really like him. He's a fantastic receiver. But Carter is also an excellent receiver in the middle area of the field, especially in zones and working with his quarterback and having a good feel and communication for when the first window of his break doesn't come open and working to get open, within that next window or two of opportunity for the quarterback to throw the ball. He's excellent in that regard. He's a guy that, like I said, pulls through reaches and wraps, bounces off some contact in the, against linemen, glancing shots that I don't think Helaire really has ever shown. So this is a guy that on his own, even though he was paired with Javonte Williams, on his own, he's a dynamic prospect. And I think he's closer to the Brian Westbrook comparison in a lot of ways. And he's very similar to a back that came out of North Carolina a number of years ago, who, when he got opportunities during the height of his career before his ACL tear, Giovanni Bernard was pretty darn good. And I think that he's just been mismatched a little bit on a team that didn't use him to his, absolute, maximum possibility of potential. And I think that that's what we're looking at with Carter, is that if you put him in a team where, say, he's with what the Patriots used to do, and you want him as like your future James White type of player, you put him on a team that has that kind of scheme, Carter could be really dynamic for fantasy players, but there's a little bit more downside to him because he could wind up in a Giovanni Bernard-like role.
Right. Take him to Tampa. How many dudes do we have to be told is going to catch 80 passes for Tampa? Like 3 of them, and none of them do. Like,
right.
That would probably be a terrific spot for him. So we're probably out of the elite territory at this point. Let me do Romandre Stevenson next because you mentioned him. He's part of why Trey Sermon left Oklahoma. I think there are scouts who have said they are higher on Romandre Stevenson than you are, and maybe you could tell me why.
And it's funny because I actually am pretty darn high on him, but it's just there's a level of projection that, I think that you have to make. And the way my system works, if you're going to look at my ranking for him, it's probably low compared to where the scouts are, but where my grade is, it's right in that same range. Like if you took Romandre Stevenson, there's probably 3 to 4 players above him that he's in the same range with for me in terms of tier. So to me, it's more about what are you looking for from a back? And Stevenson is 5'11", 230, but he arrived at Oklahoma last year at 250. He lost 20 pounds while he was playing. This is a former 2,000-yard rusher in the junior college circuit who's been reworking his body while he's been playing Big 12 football and appeared at his pro day at 230. He didn't have unbelievable metrics in terms of his, 43, three-cone and short shuttle, but they were decent enough. And when you watch him on the field, you see real fluidity with his hips to be able to change direction. And he understands how to set up defenders and set up angles and use his feet and decelerate fast so that he can change direction. He has unbelievably soft hands and pass tracking, like just a natural pass catcher who can pluck the ball out of the air with one hand over his shoulder, working downhill. He's someone that also understands that he's a big back. He's not one of these backs who, he can hurdle somebody, but he's not like, I would joke, like Michael Bush back in the day with the Raiders or Brandon Jacobs, who were, for a while you had to say, dude, you need to play like you're 240, 250
Legarrette Blount.
pounds.
Legarrette Blount, Mr. Tiptoe.
Yeah, Legarrette Blount, certainly. But I would say the thing with Legarrette Blount that he certainly could drop the pads at times, but Stevenson's a guy who, when he's in short yardage, he will bowl over a defensive tackle. He will drop his pads and win that interaction with an early attack and a technically sound one. So this is a guy who knows what he is, knows how to execute it, has versatility. He's a very good pass protector. I think he's a guy, and I'm also excited about, and while I couldn't really bake this into my projection at a level that would make it glaringly obvious without reading what I wrote, this is a guy that I think has room to get quicker and faster. I don't think he's fully maximized what his frame can offer and what his athletic ability may show, because I've seen some metrics that they may be wrong, but they kind of show what I've seen glimpses on the field, which is that he might be faster and quicker than timed and might be able to exploit that more when he's in better shape. And if that happens and that transformation happens, he could easily turn out to be one of the best 3 to 4 backs in this class.
Yeah, I mean, when James Conner is the best case, that sort of big dude who can move, that's not a terrible best case. I mean, Conner's been hurt, and Conner came with all sorts of illnesses, terrible. He's had terrible luck in his genetic lottery that Romandre Stevenson hasn't had. So there's some intrigue there. I want to get to Khalil Herbert. I think you're higher on Khalil Herbert as a sleeper than he's going to go in the draft. Tell me about him.
Yeah, he's basically a Dalvin Cook starter kit in the same way that I joked, who's the receiver for the Dolphins who got hurt in his second year out of Colorado State. I can't remember his name, but I've joked that he was the A.J. Green starter kit. Khalil Herbert is 5'9", 210, very similar dimensions to what Dalvin Cook was coming out of school. His metrics are very similar, 4.46 40, 4.31 20 shuttle, 6.9 6.3 cone drill. He also has that curvy linear movement like Dalvin Cook. And He is a guy that can break long runs. He has good contact balance. He's lower because, he played at Kansas to begin his career, and he basically outclassed Puka Williams, in every way. But, Kansas was kind of a struggling program. He transferred to Virginia Tech, looked very strong, and got on the radar this year. And because he was on the radar this year, he's kind of a guy that's rising on draft boards, but won't rise fast enough because of his position, that you'll probably end up getting him early day 3, or by some shocker late day 2 if some team is just really in love with him. But I think he'll start his career as considered a reserve with promise who ends up seeing the field a little bit more than what you would expect in year 1. And then you might look at him and go, wow, this is someone who's suddenly now in contention for the lead back role, if not the starting role. I think he's capable of growing into that. So I'm excited about seeing where he lands and if he gets that opportunity.
So, 5'9", 210. There's a lot of short guys who weigh more than you would expect at running back in this draft. There aren't a ton of 5'9", 215 guys in the league at running back. That's the Mark Ingram body, right?
Yeah, Frank Gore.
So it's interesting that we have so many of those, and we're guessing based on metrics that maybe quicker than we typically think of that body type. Some variety of quicker, whether it's just straight line speed, whether it's directional change. Interesting. Like if this is a new thing that you can get Mark Ingram but fast, that could be pretty good.
Yeah.
So okay, I'm going to ask you. Let's throw out a few more names. You don't have to do. Pick one who you like out of this threesome, like most maybe. Jarrett Patterson, Kenneth Gainwell, and a big name, partly because people like the first name, but also he ran for 2,000 yards a couple years ago, Chubba Hubbard at Oklahoma State. Which of those three do you prefer?
I'd say if at this range of the draft, if you're going for upside, you're probably going to go for Chubba Hubbard, even though he's my lowest ranked guy out of the three, mainly because I think he'll be fit into an outside zone scheme where his burst will be a real asset to his game. If you're looking for the safest guy, then I would say Patterson's your safest guy, and your biggest boom bust player is Gainwell, because I just don't trust him to add the weight that he needs to add. But if he can and get quicker, his acceleration is questionable. If he can get quicker, there's a little Tiki Barber in his game that could be a late bloomer, even by NFL standards, like Barber was.
So you have a section in the RSP that's running back projects, right? You like some of their athletic attributes. You like some of their film. They were obviously very productive in college just because they're better than most of the players they're on the field with, and that's true with Gainwell playing at Memphis. He's the number one project on your list of running back projects where, you see him get heavier over the course of his college career. You see him start to be a little more physical as he goes, and you imagine, can this quote unquote by NFL standards little guy become sturdier than he is? Then some of that speed and keep some of that speed. He could be really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a number of guys, and we could even go deeper if we wanted to down the line. But there are guys that have certain athletic elements that are kind of interesting in this particular class, who are, Brian Robinson is big and he's got some speed he can catch out of Alabama, backed up a number of great backs. He could have a role in the league. Josh Johnson out of University of Louisiana Monroe is a Devonta Freeman type of back who might not be, his speed is just maybe enough for teams to say we could use him for a bit as a starter. He's quick. He's stronger than you think. Again, one of those 5'9", heavier than you think backs with cutting ability who's good in zone. Chris Evans is interesting because he's out of Michigan. He's 5'11", 211, and he's got 4.4 40, 4.1 420 shuttle, 6.5 6.3 cone drill, meaning he is very quick, great change of direction, catches the ball really well. But that's kind of how he was used. But because of it was Michigan's program and they've kind of struggled and offensively at times, there's a lot of players on Michigan's program who they're athletically seem a lot better than what their tape shows. And he's one of those guys who had limited tape, limited looks in ways that you really want to evaluate him, who could be better than where I have him ranked, or he could very well this is the guy of who he is, which is a sub-package player at best.
But somebody like that who, because he didn't have big production, he is a big name. Like, I remember him from years that I was watching college football because Michigan's just a big program, but didn't have a ton of production. He's just not going to go high, right? He's going to be a back half of the draft. So for Dynasty, we could take a stab at, a fourth round pick or something, take a stab maybe just on the athletic traits being certainly big enough, and then also having long speed and quickness like that, and just see if he turns into a player at all. I mean, the scary part about him in the RSP is you compared him to Buck Allen.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, you look at the skills and it's kind of a neutral man kind of, okay, he can do work for you, but are you really going to rely on him as a starter? And from what I've seen in his career right now, he's the player that I would say I had the least confidence in the exposure of reps that I've seen to be like, am I firm on what I can tell you about him? Because it's like the way they used him, if they used him more between the tackles, I could probably give you a more definitive viewpoint about it. But it was one of those situations that what I did see wasn't all that positive, but I know that it wasn't enough in ways for me to be 100% confident about it.
Right. Yeah, if he's Buck Allen, then I don't even want to take him in the fourth round of a dynasty draft. Poor Buck. He was sort of a people had pretty strongly varying opinions on whether, because he come out of USC, it was a good team, and tall guys.
I was mad too. I was mad Buck Allen as well.
Yeah. He went the fourth round to the Ravens, and people are like, steal. Unbelievable fantasy starter. I think the receiver you're referring to is Preston Williams, right? I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. AJ Green starter kit. There you go.
Catching up on that. All right. Well, I think we've covered the most of the big names, but there are going to be others, and there are also other positions covered in the rookie scouting portfolio. Again, I cannot recommend you getting the rookie scouting portfolio enough. It's Matt Waldman, RSP.com. That's right?
That's right. You got it.
From memory. And really, it's completely worth it. If you like the Almanac, you'll like this too. It's the same approach. You'll get entertained because the writing is fun, and then you'll also get a lot of eyeball test kind of information that will help you. It doesn't have to be for Dynasty either. Frankly, rookies contribute now, so getting a jump on Trey Sermon, and then having him in mind when you do your redraft league when he's third on somebody's depth chart, and then he kind of bursts onto the scene in September. It's not
my readers have been very happy in past years when I've said Justin Jefferson was probably the safest pick to have after the draft based on his landing spot, and that A.J. Brown was also one of the most productive picks to have after his landing spot when a lot of people didn't think that.
I didn't.
Yeah,
AJ Brown. If this is really AJ Brown, man, this is a totally separate conversation. Then I feel like I ate it hard because I still don't really think he's awesome. He's just nobody can tackle him.
See, I'm in love with AJ Brown, but I hear you. Yeah. But that's the thing. So I mean, you get a pre-draft and post-draft with it, and I talk about landing spots. But most of my fantasy readers who are new, they'll be like, "I wish you could sell the post-draft separately." And I say, trust me, in about 3 years. You're gonna be looking forward to the pre-draft more than the post-draft. Yeah. And I literally have people write me and go, count me among the converted. Like every year, it just happens that way.
100%.
Because it's just how that whole thing works.
Well, we're just terrible at predicting situations. It's sort of the foundation of this podcast. Like, we all think we know exactly what every offense is going to be because they were that at the end of last year, or they added this, Kenny Galladay's on the Giants now, and they decide they know what these teams are going to be. It's just so important to know what the players themselves are capable of, and the RSP will do that for you. If you want to follow Matt on Twitter, please do, at Matt Waldman. Thank you for walking me through these players some of whom I have actually seen play, but a couple I haven't because I didn't watch any 2020 college football. Thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing what these guys can do and looking forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for listening. Let me also thank some great sponsors that we had today. We had Gabby Insurance, we had First Leaf, and we had HelloFresh. And I can honestly tell you, these are 3 sponsors that I have used extensively and enjoyed quite a bit. I mean, the First Leaf and HelloFresh, just really great tasting. And Gabby Insurance, really, honestly, paid absolutely nothing and wound up saving money on a homeowner's insurance policy that I have. So I recommend all 3. You can find links in the show notes of this MP3 file. You can find links with all our promo codes and stuff on the harrisfootball.com website. It is great when you support sponsors who support things that you like. If you have the means, if you have the need, it shows them that sponsoring the show works. And these, especially First Leaf and HelloFresh, I mean, they've been around for 4 years plus each. So obviously lots of folks out there have tried and liked what they've gotten from them. And I'm not trying to ask anybody to do anything that they can't afford or don't want to do, but if you're intrigued, it would be wonderful if you used our promo code, because that's how they know to keep coming back and sponsoring. So that was a good conversation with Matt and really useful for me. Super, super useful. And the RSP is so good and useful. I would recommend it. And yet, as I said to start the interview, the running back class isn't even really considered to be all that great. You know, if you're talking 3, maybe in Matt's mind, 4 guys who could, if they land in the right situation and the right guy gets hurt or whatever, could have great rookie years, but they're probably largely looking at more dynasty value and you know, year 2, year 3, maybe being when they break out. Can't say that with blanket surety, but I you know, it isn't the most bowl you over kind of running back class. I say all that by way of saying next week's topic, it's another really good wide receiver class. You've probably seen, if you've been tuning into YouTube, youtube.com/HarrisFootball, you've seen some videos where we're like, oh my God, a couple of these guys are great, and there's more than just a couple. So we're going to do what we just did for running backs, but for wide receivers on next week's podcast. And my guest for that will be Nick Whalen, a many-time guest when we've been evaluating college scouts. Nick is great, college players. Nick is a college scout who's great. And so we will learn tons about what could be, once again, a pretty historic wide receiver class. Until then, your hat is awesome. You're awesome for wearing it. Thank you for listening, and I will talk to you next week.
The Harris Football Podcast's opening theme is Under the Gun by Apex Manor. The closing theme is Say Yes by The Wellspring. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and never miss an episode.